December 18th, 2022. The stadium in Qatar is shaking. Argentina's players are celebrating wildly around their captain. And then in the middle of it all stands Lionel Messi, holding the one trophy that had defined the debate around his career for nearly 20 years. For some athletes, a moment like that would be the beginning of the story. For Messi, it was the ending. Because the journey that led to that moment didn't begin in packed stadiums or under bright lights. It started in a working class neighborhood in Rosario, with a kid who loved football more than anything in the world. A kid who at 10 years old was told his body might not grow properly. A kid who had to take growth hormone injections every single night just for the chance to keep playing the game. And somehow, that same kid went on to become one of the greatest athletes the world has ever seen. Today we're diving into the full story of Lionel Messi, from the dusty pitches of Rosario to the biggest stages in football history. And if you enjoy deep dives into the stories behind the world's greatest athletes, make sure you're following the show so you never miss an episode. Because this one is a story about talent, resilience, and a quiet kind of greatness that changed the game forever. Let's start at the beginning. To really understand the story of Lionel Messi, you have to go back long before the stadium lights, long before the Champions League nights in Barcelona, and long before he lifted the World Cup trophy with Argentina in 2022. The story begins in the Argentine city of Rosario, a place where football is not just a pastime, but a deeply ingrained part of everyday life. Rosario sits along the banks of the Paraná River about 300 kilometers northwest of Buenos Aires. It is one of Argentina's largest cities, but culturally, it has always carried its own identity. The city is proud, passionate, and fiercely loyal to its football clubs. On almost any street corner, you can find children kicking a ball between improvised goals made from backpacks, rocks, or pieces of wood. In neighborhoods across the city, football is a language kids grow up speaking. It was in this environment that Lionel Andre Messi was born on June 24th, 1987, into a modest, hardworking family. His father, George Messi, worked long shifts in a steel factory, while his mother, Celia, worked in a small workshop that manufactured magnets. The family lived a simple life, built around work, school, and time spent together. But football was always present in the household. Lionel grew up alongside his two older brothers, Rodrigo and Matias, as well as his younger sister, Maria Sol. As the youngest of the boys, Lionel spent much of his childhood chasing after his older brothers, both literally and figuratively. They played football constantly, whether it was in the street, in local parks, or on dusty neighborhood pitches. And Lionel was always determined to keep up with them, despite being smaller than most of the other kids. Family members later recalled that Lionel seemed to have a ball at his feet almost all the time. Even at a very young age, he displayed an unusual comfort with the ball. Instead of kicking it ahead and running after it the way many children do, he kept it close, guiding it with short, controlled touches as he moved through tight spaces. When other kids tried to take the ball away, he would shift his body slightly, slip past them, and continue forward as if the ball were attached to his foot. One of the most important figures in Messi's early life was his grandmother, Celia. She frequently took him to training sessions and youth matches when his parents were working. And many people close to the family say she was one of the first to recognize that Lionel might have something special. She encouraged him constantly, celebrated his goals, and supported his dream of becoming a footballer long before anyone outside the family even knew his name. Her influence remained with him throughout his life. Years later, when Messi scored goals on the biggest stages in world football, he often raised both hands and pointed towards the sky. It was his quiet tribute to the grandmother who had believed in him from the very beginning. Messi's first organized football experience came at the age of 4 when he joined a small local club called Grandoli. His father, George, actually coached one of the teams, which meant Lionel spent countless hours around the pitch, watching older kids play and waiting for his own chance to join in. Those early matches were typical youth football games filled with energy, chaos, and excitement. But even in those early years, something about Messi's style of play stood out. Coaches and parents noticed that when he had the ball, it seemed unusually difficult for other children to take it away from him. This was not because he was physically stronger or faster. In fact, he was usually smaller than most of the players around him. What made him different was his balance and his instinct for movement. He seemed to glide through defenders, slipping through spaces that looked too small for anyone to pass through. By the time Messi was 8 years old, his talent had already caught the attention of scouts from one of Rosario's major clubs, Newell's Old Boys. Joining the youth academy at Newell's was a significant step for any young player in the region, and for Messi, it marked the beginning of a reputation that would quickly spread across youth football in Argentina. Messi became part of a youth team that would later be nicknamed La Máquina del 87, or the Machine of 87, which is a reference to the year many of the players on the team had been born. The group gained a reputation for dominating youth tournaments throughout the region, and Messi quickly emerged as its most influential player. Stories from that time often describe him scoring goal after goal while weaving through defenders with the same effortless control that would later define his professional career. Yet while Messi's football ability was developing rapidly, something about his physical development began to worry his family. Around the age of 10, it became clear that Messi was growing much more slowly than other children his age. Doctors eventually diagnosed him with growth hormone deficiency, a medical condition in which the body does not produce enough growth hormone to stimulate normal development during childhood. Growth hormone is produced by the pituitary gland and plays a crucial role in regulating bone growth, muscle development, and overall physical maturation. In children who suffer from growth hormone deficiency, the lack of this hormone can significantly slow physical growth, often resulting in shorter stature and delayed development if the condition is not treated. For a child dreaming of becoming a professional footballer, the diagnosis was frightening. Without treatment, Messi's projected adult height would have been far below average, and competing physically in professional sport would have been extremely difficult. Doctors recommended a treatment plan involving regular injections of synthetic growth hormone. The treatment required daily injections, usually administered in the legs, and the injection sites had to rotate to avoid tissue damage. So essentially, he would put the shot in one leg on one night and then alternate to the other, do the other leg the next night, and that was just to help prevent scarring and any muscle-related issues from constantly jabbing a needle in there. For Messi, this quickly became part of everyday life. Each evening, he would receive the injection, alternating legs from night to night as part of the routine that doctors had prescribed. What made the situation even more difficult was the cost of the treatment. At the time, the medication cost roughly $900 per month, which placed a heavy financial burden on the Messi family. For a working-class household in Argentina during the 1990s, that amount of money was extremely difficult to sustain long-term. For a while, Newell's Old Boys contributed to the cost of the treatment, recognizing Messi's remarkable potential. But the club could not guarantee that support indefinitely. Other clubs in Argentina expressed interest in signing Messi to their youth systems, but once the conversation turned to the financial responsibility of his medical treatment, negotiations became more complicated. Moments like this can determine the future of a young athlete, because if the right opportunity never appears, even extraordinary talent can remain undiscovered. But in the year 2000, when Messi was 13 years old, an opportunity emerged that would change not only his life, but the course of football history. The Spanish club FC Barcelona invited Messi to travel to Spain for a trial. Messi and his father boarded a flight to Europe, leaving behind the familiar streets of Rosario for a completely new environment. It was the first time Lionel had traveled so far from home, and the adjustment would not be easy. But when the small teenager from Argentina stepped onto the training field in Barcelona and began to play, something remarkable happened. The coaches watching him quickly stopped thinking about his medical condition or his physical size. They started focusing on something much more important. Because the way he moved with the ball at his feet looked unlike anything they had seen before. And within a matter of days, Barcelona's staff realized they might be looking at a player capable of changing the game itself. What happened next would become one of the most famous recruitment stories in football history. But even that story almost didn't happen. When 13-year-old Lionel Messi arrived in Spain for his trial with FC Barcelona in the year 2000, the situation surrounding his potential signing was far from straightforward. Barcelona's scouts had already heard whispers about the small Argentine boy with extraordinary ball control, but the club still needed to see him in person. Trials were common in youth football, and dozens of young players from around the world traveled to European academies every year, hoping for the same opportunity. But within a matter of minutes of watching Messi play, Barcelona's coaching staff began to sense that this trial might be different. Even though Messi was physically smaller than almost every other player on the field, the way he moved with the ball immediately caught the coach's attention. His dribbling was smooth and controlled, and he seemed to glide through defenders with a calmness that looked far beyond his age. Karl Reksak, that's probably not correct, but I tried. One of Barcelona's sporting directors at the time was particularly impressed. According to one of the most famous stories in football scouting history, Reksak was so convinced of Messi's potential that he wrote an agreement to sign him on a paper napkin during a meeting with Messi's father. The document was informal, but the message behind it was clear. Barcelona wanted Messi. Just as importantly, the club agreed to cover the cost of his growth hormone treatment as part of the deal, something that had prevented Argentine clubs from signing him earlier. For the Messi family, the decision was enormous. Moving to Spain meant leaving behind their home in Rosario, their relatives, and the familiar environment where Lionel had grown up. It meant adapting to a new country, a new language, an entirely different culture. Messi initially moved with his father while the rest of the family remained in Argentina. And for a 13-year-old boy, the transition was not easy. Friends and teammates later recalled that Messi struggled with homesickness during his early months in Barcelona. He was naturally shy, and adjusting to life in a foreign country made him even quieter. At times, he considered returning to Argentina, unsure if the move had been the right decision. But football quickly became the thing that helped him adapt. Messi joined Barcelona's famous youth academy, known as La Masia, which had already produced several talented players who would go on to represent the club's first team. La Masia was not just a training facility, it was a philosophy built around technical development, tactical awareness, and intelligent possession-based football. Young players trained intensely, but were also taught to understand the game intellectually. Coaches emphasized positioning, spatial awareness, and quick passing rather than relying solely on physical strength or speed. For Messi, the environment was almost perfectly suited to his style of play. Training sessions often began with tight passing drills known as rondos, where players formed a circle and attempted to keep possession while one or two defenders tried to intercept the ball. The exercise required quick thinking, precise touches, and constant awareness of teammates' positioning. Messi excelled in these drills almost immediately. Coaches noticed that before receiving the ball, he frequently glanced over his shoulder to scan the field. By the time the pass reached him, he already seemed to know where his next move would be. This habit would later become one of the defining features of his playing style. But while Messi was thriving technically, his physical development still required careful attention. The growth hormone treatment continued during his early years in Barcelona, and the club's medical staff monitored his progress closely. The injections gradually allowed his body to develop more normally, helping him grow stronger and slightly taller while maintaining the balance and low center of gravity that would later make him so difficult to tackle. Despite the challenges of adapting to a new country and continuing his medical treatment, Messi's talent began to shine more brightly with each passing session. He progressed rapidly through Barcelona's youth teams, often playing against opponents several years older than himself. Coaches began realizing that the young Argentine wasn't simply talented for his age, he was exceptional. Stories from youth matches during those years often describe Messi dribbling through entire defenses before calmly finishing past the goalkeeper. In some games, he seemed almost unstoppable, weaving through defenders with the same effortless control that had amazed coaches back in Rosario. By the time Messi reached his mid-teens, people inside the club were beginning to talk about him as one of the most promising prospects Barcelona had ever developed. But youth success doesn't always translate to professional football. The next challenge would be proving that his talent could survive the enormous jump to the senior level. Messi made his official first-team debut for Barcelona in October of 2004. During a match against Espanyol, at just 17 years old, he became one of the youngest players ever to appear in a competitive match for the club. The moment marked a significant milestone, but the transition to professional football required patience. The speed of the game was faster, the defenders were stronger, and the physical demands were far greater than anything he had experienced in youth football. Fortunately, Messi was not navigating this new stage of his career alone. One of the most important figures in his early professional development was Brazilian superstar Ronaldinho. At the time, Ronaldinho was widely considered one of the best players in the world and the creative heart of Barcelona's attack. Instead of viewing the young Argentine as competition, Ronaldinho welcomed him warmly into the team. He invited Messi to dinners with teammates, helped him feel comfortable in the dressing room, and often encouraged him to play with confidence during training sessions. Their connection became even more memorable during Messi's first official goal for Barcelona in 2005. During a league match against Albacete, Ronaldinho delivered a perfectly weighted pass over the defense. Messi ran onto the ball and delicately chipped it over the goalkeeper. As the ball dropped into the net, Ronaldinho celebrated by lifting the young Messi onto his shoulders. The image became symbolic. The established superstar celebrating the arrival of the next generation. But the road ahead was still far from smooth. Just as Messi's career began gaining momentum, injuries started to interrupt his progress. Muscle strains and hamstring problems sidelined him during several periods of the early seasons, raising concerns about whether his body could handle the demands of elite football. Instead of discouraging him, those setbacks pushed Messi to refine his training habits. Barcelona's medical and performance staff worked closely with him to improve his conditioning. Strength training focused heavily on stabilizing the hips, hamstrings, and core muscles that supported his explosive playing style. Recovery routines became equally important, with stretching, physiotherapy, and careful workload management forming a critical part of his development. Messi embraced these routines with the same quiet determination he had shown during his years of medical treatment as a child. And gradually, his body began to adapt. As his strength improved and injuries became less frequent, Messi's performances on the field started reaching a new level. Inside the Barcelona dressing room, players began to sense that something remarkable might be happening. Because the small, quiet teenager from Rosario was no longer just a promising young player. He was becoming the most dangerous attacker on the pitch. And soon, a new coach would arrive who would see exactly how to unlock Messi's full potential. That coach was about to transform both Barcelona and Lionel Messi himself forever. By the late 2000s, Lionel Messi had already established himself as one of the most exciting young players in world football. His dribbling ability, balance, and creativity had made him a regular presence in Barcelona's starting lineup. And fans were beginning to realize that the quiet teenager who had arrived from Argentina only a few years earlier possessed something truly special. But even then, the most extraordinary chapters of Messi's career were still ahead of him. In the summer of 2008, FC Barcelona made a decision that would ultimately reshape both the club and modern football itself. Instead of appointing a famous, established manager, the club promoted a relatively inexperienced coach from their B team. His name was Pep Guardiola. At the time, Guardiola's appointment raised questions throughout European football. While he had been a brilliant midfielder during his playing days at Barcelona, he had very little experience managing at the highest level. But inside the club, there was a belief that Guardiola understood Barcelona's football philosophy better than anyone else. He believed in possession-based football, constant movement, and intelligent positioning. More importantly, he believed that the team's entire attacking system should revolve around Messi. Up until that point, Messi had mostly played as a right winger, receiving the ball near the sideline before cutting inside onto his stronger left foot. Guardiola studied Messi's movement carefully and came to the conclusion that he could influence the game far more if he played through the center of the field. So, Guardiola made a tactical adjustment that would become famous throughout the football world. He moved Messi into the middle of the attack as what became known as a false nine. Traditionally, the number 9 position in football belongs to a striker who stays close to the opponent's defensive line, waiting for opportunities inside the penalty area. Guardiola asked Messi to do something very different. Instead of staying high up the pitch, Messi frequently dropped deeper into midfield to collect the ball. This created a dilemma for opposing defenders. If they followed Messi into midfield, they left dangerous space behind them for Barcelona's other attackers to exploit. However, if they stayed back, Messi suddenly had room to turn and run directly at the defense. It was a subtle tactical shift, but its impact was enormous. With players like Xavi and Andre Iniesta controlling possession in midfield, Barcelona developed a style of play that seemed almost impossible to stop. The ball moved quickly between players, defenders were constantly pulled out of position, and Messi became the creative center of everything. Opponents quickly discovered that defending Messi required far more than physical strength or speed. Few players experienced that challenge more often than Sergio Ramos. As the captain of Real Madrid's defense, Ramos spent years facing Messi during El Clasico matches, one of the fiercest rivalries in sports. Ramos was known for his aggressive defending and physical presence, yet even he acknowledged that Messi presented a unique problem. Ramos once explained that most attacking players give defenders clue about what they are about to do. Their body language suggests whether they might cut inside or accelerate down the line. Messi, however, rarely provided those signals. His movements were so quick and controlled that defenders often reacted a split second too late, which in football can be the difference between stopping an attack and watching it end in a goal. As Barcelona's system continued to evolve, the team entered one of the most dominant periods in club football history. The 2008-2009 season ended with Barcelona winning 3 major trophies: La Liga, the Copa del Rey, and the UEFA Champions League. In the Champions League final, Barcelona faced Manchester United, the defending European champions managed by Sir Alex Ferguson. Manchester United also featured one of Messi's greatest rivals. I'm sure you've heard of him, Cristiano Ronaldo, whose incredible scoring ability had already made him one of the most recognizable players in the world. Barcelona won the match 2-0, and Messi scored the second goal with a looping header that floated over goalkeeper Edwin van der Sar. Considering Messi's height, the goal seemed almost ironic, but it symbolized something important. Messi was no longer simply a promising young player. He had become the centerpiece of the best team in Europe. Inside the Barcelona dressing room, teammates were beginning to realize just how extraordinary his vision on the field truly was. Former French striker Thierry Henry once described a training session in which Messi dribbled past several defenders before delivering a perfectly timed pass between 2 players for a teammate to score. After the play ended, Henry approached him and asked how he had seen the opening. Messi reportedly shrugged and answered simply, "I saw the space." That understated response captured something fundamental about the way Messi understood football. Where most players reacted to what was happening around them, Messi often seemed to anticipate events before they unfolded. One of the greatest demonstrations of Barcelona's dominance came during the 2011 Champions League final at Wembley Stadium. Once again, their opponent was Manchester United. For the first 20 minutes, the match remained competitive as United attempted to disrupt Barcelona's passing rhythm. But gradually, Barcelona began to control possession, moving the ball quickly through midfield while United players chased in pursuit. In the second half, Messi received the ball outside the penalty area. With only a small pocket of space in front of him, he took a touch forward and struck a low shot toward the corner of the net. The ball slipped past Van der Sar and into the goal. Barcelona eventually won the match 3-1, and after the final whistle, Sir Alex Ferguson famously described Barcelona as the best team he had ever faced. At the center of that team's success was Lionel Messi. Yet perhaps the most astonishing moment of Messi's career during those years came in 2012. Over the course of that calendar year, Messi scored 91 goals for club and country. The previous record, set by German legend Gerd Müller, had stood for 40 years. Messi didn't simply break it. He surpassed it with several matches still remaining in the year. Goals came from every possible situation. Some were delicate chips over advancing goalkeepers. Others were curling free kicks that bent perfectly into the top corner. Many came from long dribbling runs where Messi navigated through multiple defenders before calmly finishing the move himself. Inside the Barcelona squad, players began to realize they were witnessing something rare in the history of sport. They weren't simply playing alongside a great footballer. They were watching a player reach a level that few athletes in any sport had ever achieved. By the time Guardiola left Barcelona in 2012, Messi had evolved into the most influential player in the world. He had helped transform Barcelona into one of the greatest club teams ever assembled, and his individual performances were rewriting record books across Europe. But while Messi was conquering club football in Spain, another challenge was waiting for him far from Barcelona. Because in Argentina, greatness is measured by a different standard, and the one trophy that truly defines a football legend is the World Cup. By the early 2010s, Lionel Messi had already conquered nearly everything club football had to offer. With FC Barcelona, he had won multiple league titles, Champions League trophies, and individual awards that placed him firmly among the greatest players the sport had ever seen. Yet for many people in Argentina, the conversation surrounding Messi remained unfinished. Argentina is a country where football carries enormous cultural significance, and the legacy of players is often measured against one defining achievement: winning the World Cup. The shadow of Diego Maradona, who had led Argentina to victory in the 1986 World Cup, still loomed large over the sport in the country. For years, comparisons between Maradona and Messi dominated football debates across Argentina. Many fans admired Messi's brilliance at Barcelona, but they wanted to see that same magic delivered on the international stage. The opportunity to answer those questions came during the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. Argentina entered the tournament with a talented squad, but throughout the competition it became clear that Messi was the player carrying the team's creative responsibility. During the group stage, he scored several crucial goals, including a memorable late winner against Iran that secured Argentina's place in the knockout rounds. As the tournament progressed, the team began to grow stronger defensively, grinding out narrow victories that pushed them deeper into the competition. By the time Argentina reached the semifinal against the Netherlands, the pressure surrounding the team had become immense. The match itself turned into a tense tactical battle in which neither side could find a breakthrough. After 90 minutes of regular time and 30 minutes of extra time, the score remained tied. The outcome would be decided by a penalty shootout. Inside the Argentine dressing room before the shootout, the atmosphere was tense but determined. Defender Javier Mascherano, one of the most emotional leaders of the squad, gathered the players together and delivered a message that teammates would remember long after the tournament had ended. Mascherano reminded them of everything they had sacrificed to reach that moment. The years of training, the expectations of millions of supporters watching from home, and the opportunity that stood directly in front of them. According to several players who were there, his message was simple. They had not come this far to stop now. Messi stepped forward to take Argentina's first penalty. With the stadium holding its breath, he calmly placed the ball into the corner of the net. Argentina eventually won the shootout and advanced to the World Cup final. For a moment, it seemed as though the story of Messi's international career might reach its perfect ending. But football can be cruel. In the final against Germany, Argentina battled fiercely, but struggled to convert their scoring opportunities. Deep into extra time, German forward Mario Götze scored the goal that decided the match. When the final whistle blew, Messi stood on the field knowing that Argentina had come painfully close to lifting the trophy. One image from that night became iconic. Messi walking past the World Cup trophy during the post-match ceremony, glancing briefly at the prize that had slipped just beyond his reach. And the heartbreak did not end there. Argentina reached the finals of the Copa America tournament in both 2015 and 2016. And on both occasions, they lost to Chile in penalty shootouts. After the second defeat, the emotional toll of repeated near misses became overwhelming. Messi shocked the football world by announcing that he was retiring from international football. For many fans in Argentina, the announcement felt like a devastating conclusion to a career that had promised so much, but had fallen just short of delivering the one title the country valued most. Yet Messi's story with Argentina was not finished. After taking time away from the national team, he eventually returned, motivated by the belief that the team still had unfinished business. Over time, a new generation of Argentine players began to emerge around him, bringing fresh energy and belief to the squad. One of those players was midfielder Rodrigo de Paul. De Paul quickly became one of Messi's closest teammates in the national team setup. Known for his relentless work rate and emotional intensity on the field, De Paul often joked that he considered himself Messi's bodyguard during matches. His role, as he described it, was to run, fight, and protect Messi so that the team's captain could focus on creating moments of brilliance. That attitude reflected a broader shift within the Argentine squad. For the younger players, Messi was no longer simply a superstar they admired from a distance. He was a leader whose career they wanted to help complete. That sense of unity became especially visible during the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. Argentina's campaign began with an unexpected shock when they lost their opening match to Saudi Arabia. The defeat stunned fans and analysts around the world, raising doubts about whether the team could recover. Instead, the setback seemed to galvanize the squad. Match by match, Argentina rebuilt momentum, defeating opponents with a combination of tactical discipline, collective effort, and Messi's creative brilliance. He delivered outstanding performances throughout the knockout rounds, guiding the team past Australia, the Netherlands, and then Croatia. And then came the final against France. The match quickly turned into one of the most dramatic World Cup finals ever played. Messi scored during the match, helping Argentina build a lead. But French forward Kylian Mbappe responded with a stunning hat-trick that forced the match into a penalty shootout. Even Mbappe later acknowledged the extraordinary level of football Messi had displayed during the tournament, praising the way he controlled matches and inspired his teammates. When Argentina finally converted the decisive penalty and were crowned world champions, the entire team rushed toward Messi in celebration. At last, after years of heartbreak and relentless scrutiny, Lionel Messi lifted the World Cup trophy. For millions of football fans around the world, the moment felt like the completion of a story that had been unfolding for nearly 2 decades. Italian goalkeeper Gianluigi Buffon once described Messi as one of those rare athletes who makes even opponents feel privileged to share the field with him. On that night in Qatar, it felt as though the entire football world agreed. After everything he had accomplished in club football, Messi had finally achieved the one triumph that defined greatness in Argentina. And yet, even with the World Cup secured, the story of his career still had one more chapter to unfold. Because the next stage of Messi's journey would take him somewhere completely different from the stadiums of Europe. It would take him to the United States of America. When Lionel Messi lifted the World Cup trophy in December of 2022, it felt like the closing scene of a story that had been unfolding for more than 20 years. For nearly 2 decades, the one question that followed Messi everywhere was whether he could win football's most prestigious prize with Argentina. The victory in Qatar seemed to answer that question definitively, completing the one achievement that had eluded him throughout his extraordinary career. Yet, Messi was not ready to walk away from the game. At the time, he was still playing in Europe with Paris Saint-Germain, the club he had joined in 2021 after his emotional departure from Barcelona. While Messi continued to perform at a high level in France, the connection between player and club never quite carried the same depth as the relationship he had built over 2 decades with Barcelona supporters. As his contract with PSG approached its end in 2023, speculation about Messi's next move quickly became one of the most discussed topics in football. Several possibilities emerged almost immediately. Many fans hoped for a return to FC Barcelona, imagining a romantic ending where Messi would finish his European career in the stadium where he had become a global icon. At the same time, clubs in Saudi Arabia reportedly offered financial packages that were almost impossible to comprehend, with figures rumored to exceed hundreds of millions of dollars per year. Excuse me. But Messi ultimately made a decision that surprised much of the football world. He chose to move to the United States and sign with Inter Miami CF in Major League Soccer. The move was not simply about football. It reflected a combination of lifestyle, family considerations, and long-term opportunities that made the United States an appealing next chapter for Messi and his family. One of the most important figures involved in the decision was Inter Miami's co-owner, Mr. David Beckham. Beckham understood better than almost anyone what it meant to bring a global superstar into Major League Soccer. When Beckham himself joined the LA Galaxy in 2007, his arrival dramatically increased the international visibility of the league. Beckham had long dreamed of creating a similar moment for the club he had helped establish in Miami. Now, I actually went and saw Beckham play after he made the move to the LA Galaxy. I went and saw him play at here in Vancouver, near Vancouver, at BC Place Stadium against the Vancouver Whitecaps. It's an exhibition game, but that place, I don't even know what it holds, maybe 65, 70,000 people, but it was pretty well packed for an exhibition game just to see him. Went with a couple buddies, and yeah, it was pretty incredible. Can't remember what year that was. Maybe, I'm so bad at gauging time. Let's call it 2003, maybe 2002, somewhere around there. But yeah, it was wild to see just how many people showed up for the exhibition match just to get a chance to see Beckham play. He did play a bit, but didn't play the whole game. Came out, put on a show, off he went. Anyways, that's a little side story about Beckham and the Galaxy. Back to your regularly scheduled program. For years, he had spoken publicly about the ambition to attract one of the world's biggest players. Messi represented the ultimate realization of that vision. Negotiations surrounding the deal were unlike anything previously seen in MLS. Rather than simply offering a traditional player contract, the agreement included a broader partnership structure involving companies like Apple and Adidas. The arrangement reportedly included revenue-sharing elements connected to global broadcasting rights and merchandise sales, reflecting Messi's enormous influence as a worldwide sports figure. In other words, Messi's move to Miami was not just a player signing. It was a global business event. Messi later explained in interviews that his decision was also deeply influenced by his family. After years of intense scrutiny and pressure in European football, the idea of living in Miami offered a different pace of life. The city's cultural connection to Latin America, along with its climate and lifestyle, made it feel comfortable for Messi, his wife, Antonella, and their children. When Messi publicly announced his decision during an interview with Spanish media, the reaction across the football world was immediate. Many supporters were surprised. Others were excited to see what his presence might do for the growth of soccer in North America. Within days of the announcement, ticket prices for Inter Miami matches surged dramatically, and demand for the club's jersey exploded worldwide. Messi's official presentation at Inter Miami Stadium in July 2023 drew thousands of fans despite heavy rain that soaked the event. The scene felt less like a typical player introduction and more like a celebration of a global icon arriving in a new football culture. But the moment that truly captured the imagination of fans came during Messi's first match. Just days after joining the team, Messi made his debut in a Leagues Cup match against Cruz Azul. The game remained tied late into stoppage time, when Inter Miami earned a free kick just outside the penalty area. As Messi stepped forward to take the kick, the stadium fell silent. Even players on the opposing team later admitted that they knew exactly what might happen next. Messi struck the ball with his left foot, sending it curling perfectly over the defensive wall and into the top corner of the net. The goal secured victory for Inter Miami and instantly became one of the most memorable debuts in MLS history. Within weeks, the effect of Messi's presence began to ripple throughout the league. Stadiums across the United States began selling out whenever Inter Miami traveled for away matches. Fans wearing pink jerseys appeared in cities that had rarely experienced that level of global attention for soccer. Television ratings increased dramatically, and Major League Soccer suddenly found itself at the center of international football conversations. Even opposing players spoke about the experience of facing Messi. Some described it as surreal to compete against a player they had watched on television for most of their lives. Others spoke about the intensity he still brought to training sessions and matches, despite having already accomplished nearly everything possible in the sport. What impressed many teammates most was how little Messi's personality had changed. Inside the locker room, he remained quiet and focused, often letting his performances speak louder than his words. Younger players frequently described learning simply by watching how he approached training and preparation. By the time Messi arrived in Miami, his career statistics had already reached remarkable levels. He had scored more than 800 professional goals, won dozens of major trophies, and collected multiple Ballon d'Or awards, recognizing him as the best player in the world. But numbers alone never fully captured what made Messi's career extraordinary. The deeper story lies in the journey itself. From a small boy in Rosario receiving nightly injections to treat a medical condition that threatened his dream, to a teenager leaving home to chase an opportunity in Barcelona, to the centerpiece of one of the greatest club teams football had ever seen, and finally to the captain who lifted the World Cup after years of heartbreak. Each chapter added another layer to the legend. And now, playing in front of new audiences in Miami, Messi continues to do the one thing that has defined his life since childhood. He plays the game. Not as a young prodigy chasing recognition, not as a superstar trying to prove himself, but as a footballer who still seems to love the simple act of having the ball at his feet. For fans watching today, those moments carry a special feeling, because they know they are witnessing the closing scenes of a career that has shaped the history of the sport itself. So before we close the story of Lionel Messi, it's worth pausing for a moment and looking at the numbers that define his career. Because if you step back and see them all together, they help explain why so many people consider him one of the greatest footballers the sport has ever seen. Across his club career, playing for FC Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain, and Inter Miami CF, Messi has scored over 725 club goals and recorded 381 assists. At the international level with Argentina, Messi has scored 106 goals and provided 58 assists, making him both the all-time leading scorer and leading assist provider in Argentine national team history. Within those international numbers are his performances on the biggest stage in football. Across 5 World Cups, Messi scored 13 FIFA World Cup goals, which places him among the top scorers in the history of the tournament. His trophy record is equally remarkable. Messi captained Argentina to a victory in the 2022 FIFA World Cup, the most prestigious prize in international football. He also led Argentina to the 2021 Copa America title, ending a 28-year trophy drought for the national team. Since arriving in Major League Soccer with Inter Miami, Messi helped the club capture the 2023 Leagues Cup, the first major trophy in the club's history. Individually, Messi's awards set him apart from every other player of his generation. He has won the Ballon d'Or 8 times. That's more than any player in football history. He has also won the European Golden Shoe 6 times, awarded to Europe's top league scorer. And in 2012, Messi set one of the most astonishing records the sport has ever seen when he scored 91 goals in a single calendar year. The most goals ever scored by a professional footballer in 1 year. He is also Barcelona's all-time leading scorer with 672 goals, a record that may stand for generations. When you combine Lionel Messi's entire professional career for club and country, the numbers are staggering. Across 1,085 matches, Messi has scored 838 goals and recorded 439 assists. That brings his total career goal contributions to 1,277 points, meaning he has directly created well over 1,200 goals during his career. Messi's 439 career assists would already place him among the most productive attacking players in football history. To put that into perspective, many legendary strikers and attacking midfielders finish their entire careers with fewer than 300 total goals. Messi has not only scored over 800 goals, he has also created hundreds more for teammates. In other words, he hasn't just been a scorer. He has been one of the greatest playmakers the sport has ever seen. For nearly 20 years at the highest level of football, Lionel Messi has averaged more than 1 goal contribution per match, a level of consistency that almost no player in the history of the sport has maintained. It's safe to say Lionel Messi did not simply succeed in football. He reshaped what greatness in the sport looks like. When you step back and look at the full story of Lionel Messi, it almost feels impossible. Not because of the trophies, not because of the goals, but because of where it all started. Small kid in Rosario who loves football so much that he refused to let anything stand in the way of playing it. A kid who had to take nightly injections just to give his body a chance to grow. A teenager who left home and moved across the ocean, chasing a dream that was far from guaranteed. And over the next 2 decades, that same kid became the center of one of the greatest eras the sport has ever seen. He dazzled crowds in Barcelona. He rewrote scoring records. He carried the expectations of an entire nation. And after years of heartbreak with Argentina, he finally lifted the World Cup. Not with arrogance, not with loud declarations, but with the same quiet determination that had followed him since the streets of Rosario. That's what makes Messi's story so powerful. It's not just about greatness. It's about perseverance, it's about patience, and it's about the kind of discipline that turns childhood dreams into history. Because when the story of football is told for generations to come, there will always be one name that stands among the greatest to ever play the game: Messi. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life and career of Messi, make sure you're following the Discipline of Greatness podcast so you never miss an episode. And if there's another athlete whose story you'd like explored on the show, let me know. Shoot me a DM, leave a comment down below, or you can find us online at disciplineofgreatness.com. I'm Doug Miller, and remember, greatness isn't built in moments. It's built in habits. And this has been the Discipline of Greatness.